They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people closest to you. And nothing could have prepared me for the moment I found out what my husband had been doing behind my back. The man I had built a life with, trusted through thick and thin, kissed goodbye every morning with a smile, was living a second life, and he thought I'd never find out. It started with a business trip, just like all the others. He kissed me on the cheek, told me not to wait up, promised to bring back souvenirs for our son. I watched his car pull away, same as always, and went back inside to fold laundry and clean the kitchen like I always did. But that night, something felt different. He didn't call. I tried to brush it off, maybe a long flight delay, poor hotel Wi-Fi, late meetings, but deep down, something twisted in my stomach. I had ignored those feelings before, told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, but this time, I didn't. The next morning, I saw a charge pop up on our shared credit card, La Jardin Boutique, hotel in Santa Barbara. That wasn't where he said he was going. He was supposed to be in Phoenix. I stared at the transaction, the amount too high for a solo stay. My hands were shaking. I refreshed the page. It was real. That's when the dam broke. I'd always believed he was faithful. We weren't perfect, but who is? I excused his late hours, the sudden urgent trips, his phone always face down. I chalked it up to work stress, to the demands of his growing tech business. But now, my instincts screamed the truth I'd refused to see. I opened his email while he was away. He hadn't logged out. He never did. Because he never thought I'd look. That's where I found her. Emails from an account named Claire. B at all hours of the night. Their tone wasn't professional. Far from it. They spoke in code, but I understood every word. There were hotel bookings, dinner reservations, shared playlists, even a Dropbox folder labeled, "For Us." I clicked through the photos. Beachside selfies. His hand on her waist. Her lips on his cheek. A life he was living without me. Built. On lies and stolen time. My breath caught in my chest. My vision blurred. How long had he been lying? How much of our marriage had been real? I felt like a fool. I sat on the cold kitchen floor and cried until I had no more tears left. Then I sat in silence, staring at the glow of the laptop screen, the evidence of his betrayal burning into my memory. But the sadness didn't last. Something else rose from the ashes of my heartbreak. Rage. Not the kind that explodes in a moment, but the kind that simmers, calculated and sharp. He had lied to me, made me feel small, used me like a placeholder while he built a fantasy elsewhere. And he thought he could keep doing it. He thought I'd stay quiet, maybe cry a little, scream a little, and then forgive him like all those stories end. But I wasn't going to be that woman. Not anymore. I closed the laptop, wiped my face, and took a deep breath. I didn't know how, but I knew one thing for certain. I was going to make him pay. Not with screaming or begging or empty threats. No, I was going to do it my way. Smart, quiet, devastating. He thought he had secrets. He didn't know that I could steal them all and use them to bring everything crashing down around him. This wasn't just about an affair. This was war. The day he returned from his so-called business trip, I watched him walk through the front door like nothing had changed. He kissed me on the forehead, dropped his suitcase by the stairs, and asked, "What's for dinner?" I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes didn't carry guilt. He didn't hesitate. He moved through our home like a man who believed he was in total control. That's when I realized how deeply he had underestimated me. I played along. That night, I served dinner. I asked him about his meetings. I even laughed at a stupid joke he made about airport security. But under the table, I clenched my fists. I didn't say a word about what I knew. Not yet. Over the next week, the pieces started falling into place. I traced the timeline backwards. The sudden late nights, the uptick in gym visits, the guys, weekends that never included an actual friend. I remembered the perfume I once smelled on his shirt, the unfamiliar bracelet I found in the back seat of our car. All those red flags I dismissed? Now they screamed in unison. It wasn't just Claire. He had been cheating for months, maybe longer. She was just the one I caught. But betrayal wasn't the only problem. There was more. Much more. I started digging through our finances. He never tried to hide his accounts because, again, he thought I was too naive to check. That was his mistake. Within an hour, I found discrepancies: missing funds, transfers to unknown accounts, business expenses. That didn't make sense. At first, I thought maybe he was just spending on her: hotel rooms, fancy dinners, weekend getaways. But then I uncovered something worse. He wasn't just cheating on me as a husband. He was cheating me as a partner. We had built his company together. In the beginning, when he had nothing but ideas and ambition, I had worked 2 jobs so he could code late into the night. I designed his first website. I handled his first clients. When the money started rolling in, he told me I didn't need to work anymore, that I should stay home, focus on the house, the baby. I thought it was love. I thought it was a gift. Now I realized it was strategy. He was cutting me out, quietly, methodically. Over the past year, he'd been shifting business assets, changing names on documents, moving ownership into shell companies I had no visibility into. My name was disappearing from everything. It was like I had never been part of it. That was the real betrayal. He wasn't just leaving me for another woman, he was preparing to leave me with nothing. And the more I discovered, the clearer the plan became. He was going to blindside me, file for divorce, serve me papers while he was sitting on a mountain of money I'd helped him build, and then play the victim to everyone who asked. He'd cry about how I was distant, how we grew apart. He'd paint Claire as the new love of his life, and me as the cold, bitter ex-wife who couldn't keep him happy. He was orchestrating an escape. But I wasn't going to let him vanish into his new life while I was left to pick up the pieces. Not when I had access to everything: emails, documents, passwords he never changed, accounts he thought were hidden. He had played me for a fool. Now it was my turn to play him. But first, I had to keep pretending. I couldn't tip him off. Not yet. If he suspected I knew, he'd change everything. Shut me out. Lawyer up. Hide the rest of the evidence. So I smiled. I kissed him goodnight, and the next morning, I began to plan. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about survival and justice. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. Cheating? That was disgusting, yes, but survivable. What made this betrayal cut deeper was what it truly revealed: that I was disposable, that everything I had poured into this marriage, into our family, into his business, was something he believed he could just erase when it no longer served him. He thought he could replace me like an outdated phone. I was a liability to him now. I could almost hear his internal monologue. She doesn't work. She doesn't make money. She's just a stay-at-home wife. She won't fight me. She won't have the resources. She'll take what I offer and disappear quietly. But he was wrong. This wasn't just about me. It was about my son. The realization hit me like a freight train one night while I was folding his tiny laundry, the soft cotton onesies I'd bought on sale when money was tight. I looked at the baby monitor and saw his little chest rising and falling. That child had trusted me to keep him safe, to build a future for him. And his father, my husband, was gambling it all away for a second life that didn't include us. Imagined a courtroom. Him, polished in a tailored suit, explaining how I didn't contribute financially, how he built his company alone, how I chose to stay home. And the worst part? On paper, he could make it look convincing. He'd been planning for that moment. He had drained our joint savings into accounts I didn't have access to. The house, our home, was legally in his name. He'd filed the LLC without listing me as co-founder, even though I'd helped write the damn business plan. The car I drove? His lease. Every practical string tying me to financial safety had been slowly, quietly snipped. He wanted to leave me with nothing but memories. And without proof, without evidence, he could get away with it. That's when I knew if I didn't fight back now, I'd lose everything. I wouldn't just be heartbroken. I'd be homeless, penniless, and painted as the bitter ex who couldn't let go. My son's life would change forever, and that was unacceptable. I couldn't count on the legal system to suddenly recognize my contributions. Courts favor paperwork, documentation, things I didn't have yet. So I decided I would get them. I'd be smart, methodical, strategic, just like he was. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I needed time, I needed evidence, and I needed help. I began researching. At night, once he fell asleep, I would slip out of bed and sit on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, laptop perched on my knees, reading about asset tracing, hidden bank, accounts, forensic accounting, and marital fraud. I joined online forums for women going through high net worth divorces. I started keeping digital records, screenshots of emails, photos of financial statements, copies of contracts I found in his filing cabinet. I created a hidden cloud account, locked with a password he'd never guess. The deeper I looked, the more corruption I uncovered. He had used company funds for personal expenses. He had underreported earnings to keep taxes low. He had funneled money through dummy vendors, small shell businesses with vague names that turned out to be nothing but empty shells. One was even registered under Claire's maiden name. He was sloppy in his arrogance. He thought I was too blind to ever notice. But I wasn't blind anymore. I was wide awake. And every day that I stayed quiet, I was gathering ammunition, not just for me, but for my son. For every woman who had ever been cast aside because a man thought he could rewrite history with a new haircut and a prettier smile. He built a fantasy life on a foundation of lies. Now I was going to expose it, brick by brick. It's funny how silence becomes your greatest weapon when someone assumes you're weak. He had no idea that every word he spoke, every step he took in our home, was feeding a plan I had begun constructing, one calculated step at a time. I was done reacting. Now, I was orchestrating. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled, played the part of the oblivious wife, and quietly mapped out the blueprint of his downfall. The first step in my plan? Gather undeniable proof, not just of the affair, though that would help emotionally sway the narrative, but of the financial deception. Because while a court may not punish a cheating spouse, it will punish a fraudulent one. He'd grown careless, arrogant. He never expected me to look deeper. But I was digging, meticulously, methodically, into the crevices he thought were invisible. He stored most of his files in a cloud account, and I knew the password. It was the name of our son, followed by the year he launched his startup. His ego made it easy. There I found the documents, transfers between accounts, receipts labeled as consulting fees that led to Claire's bank, and business invoices with inflated expenses. There were fake transactions tied to non-existent projects, digital trails that pointed straight to personal indulgences. I started building a digital dossier, organized, dated, labeled, screenshots, PDFs, copies of tax returns, financial statements, even texts between him and Claire coordinating payments. I created a folder titled Divorce Evidence Confidential. I backed it up to 2 separate USBs and uploaded everything to an encrypted drive only I could access. The next step, legal prep. I reached out to a divorce attorney, but not just any attorney. I found a woman who specialized in high-asset separations and had a reputation for being relentless in litigation. I met her at a small cafe downtown. I arrived early, wore sunglasses, and paid in cash, just in case he was watching. I handed her one of the USB drives and told her everything. She didn't blink. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You're smart to get ahead of him. Men like this don't expect women like you to fight back. They expect you to fold." That's when I knew I had the right person on my side. Together, we began strategizing. She advised me on timing, when to file, how to serve the papers, what to freeze, what to preserve. She explained how to subpoena financial records, how to demand full discovery, how to expose fraudulent transfers. We made a list of immediate actions: open a new checking account in my name only, transfer a modest amount of funds legally to cover legal expenses, lock down our son's college fund before he could touch it, file an emergency motion to prevent any further asset movement the moment the divorce was filed. I also hired a private investigator, someone discreet. He tailed my husband during one of his late meetings and captured crystal clear photos of him dining with Claire, laughing, kissing her hand, disappearing into a hotel room. The final piece of the plan? Control the narrative. People like my husband don't just want to win. They want to be seen as winning. They craft their image carefully, curate their reputations like a social media feed. I knew if I exposed him, he wouldn't just lose money. He'd lose credibility, investors, clients, friends, maybe even Claire, once she realized the visionary entrepreneur was really a selfish, manipulative fraud. I wasn't just taking back what was mine. I was dismantling the version of himself he'd tried so hard to sell to the world. And the best part? He had no idea. He still kissed me goodnight, still called me babe, still made coffee in the mornings, oblivious to the fact that he was about to lose everything. The countdown had begun, and I was ready to pull the trigger. The days stretched long, but with each one, I moved closer to the moment when the truth would erupt in his life like a bomb. He still thought everything was normal. He was still living in his bubble of arrogance, believing I was just a naive housewife who had no idea what was going on. Every smile, every kiss he gave me, every time he asked if I needed anything, I could barely hold back the satisfaction of knowing that soon his world would come crashing down. I had gathered everything I needed, the digital evidence, the legal advice, and the private investigator's photos. Now it was time to take action. No more waiting. I had to act swiftly and decisively. I had to be the one in control of this situation, and the only way to do that was to stay 2 steps ahead. Step 1. Opening a new account. I knew that the first thing I had to do was protect myself financially. He had tried to erase me from the business, but he wasn't going to erase my security. While he was at work, I slipped into a nearby bank and opened an account in my name only. I took out a modest amount of money from our joint savings, just enough to cover initial legal fees and some emergency expenses. I didn't want to trigger any alarms, but I had to be prepared. I also made sure to freeze all my credit accounts. If he tried to move money or open a line of credit without my knowledge, I would be alerted. This was the quiet part of the plan. Keeping my assets safe while everything else unfolded. Step 2. The legal filing. Once the account was secure, I went straight to the lawyer's office and gave her the go-ahead to file the petition for divorce. She had all the paperwork ready, a motion for an emergency order to freeze his assets, a detailed list of all the evidence I had collected, and a request for a full forensic audit of the company's financial records. We also decided that the filing had to happen when he least expected it. It would be a Tuesday morning when he was busy in meetings, believing that everything was calm. I would file for divorce, and at the same time, I would file a request for a restraining order, just in case he decided to do something drastic. The lawyer reassured me that I had a strong case, especially given the documentation I had gathered. The fraudulent transfers, the hidden business accounts, the payments to Claire, everything was a smoking gun. She explained that because I was legally entitled to half of everything, we could ensure that he couldn't pull any tricks to hide assets during the divorce proceedings. Step 3. The private investigator's role. The private investigators. Work wasn't done either. I had asked him to keep tailing my husband, tracking every interaction with Claire, and making sure the documentation was rock solid. On the day of the filing, I wanted him to capture photos of my husband at the hotel, at Claire's place, anywhere that could expose him further. But the PI didn't stop there. He also found something I hadn't expected, a text message on Claire's phone, which he managed to intercept. It was a message from my husband, confirming that he had transferred more than $50,000 into an offshore account in her name, hidden, under an alias. It was a clean, clear sign of how deep he was into this betrayal, and how much he was willing to risk. That was the final nail in the coffin. Step 4. Public exposure. By now, I had been keeping track of my husband's social media. He had been posting pictures with Claire, showing off a life he wanted everyone to believe was perfect. His new beginnings, his business expansion, his romance with the younger woman. It disgusted me, but I knew it was an opportunity. While the lawyer was preparing the official filing, I began posting my own subtle breadcrumbs online. I didn't go directly for the jugular, but I started telling my story through coded messages on social media. I posted about the importance of self-respect, how sometimes you have to fight for what you deserve, and how the truth always comes out. I shared inspirational quotes about betrayal and strength. I also started letting a few friends in on what I had been dealing with. People who knew both of us. I didn't spill everything at once, but I made sure the word would get out. The people who mattered, the ones who were in my circle, who had supported me through the years, would soon know what kind of man my husband really was. Step 5. Timing is everything. The hardest part of this entire plan was the waiting. I knew that once I filed, once everything came to light, I would be free. But until then, I had to hold it together. Every conversation with my husband was a game. I had to keep him convinced that I still trusted him, that I had no idea what was coming. The hardest part was pretending to be the wife who was still waiting for him to come around. While he went about his days, smiling at his phone when Claire texted, I smiled too, but with a purpose. Every kiss, every small moment of normalcy was a calculated move. The night before I filed, I stayed up late. I double-checked every piece of evidence, ensuring there were no holes, no mistakes. The moment I clicked submit on the divorce filing, everything would change. Tomorrow was the day everything would break wide open. The day arrived, and I didn't flinch. I had spent months in the quiet darkness, building my case, watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment. That moment was now. At 9 a.m., I received a text from my lawyer. It's done. Divorce petition has been filed. You're ready for the next step. I smiled. The first step was over. But I wasn't done. This wasn't about a divorce, it was about making sure he understood the full scope of the consequences. He had to know how deeply he'd underestimated me, how far I'd gone to protect my future, and my sons. It wasn't just about exposing his infidelity. It was about exposing the truth, the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation. I watched him as he left the house that morning, wearing his usual tailored suit, his phone glued to his hand, probably texting Claire about some new business opportunity. The difference this time was that I knew everything. I wasn't the fool he thought I was. He kissed me goodbye as usual, asking if I needed anything. I just nodded and smiled. No, I'm good. Just waiting for the movers to arrive later, I said, playing my part one last time. His eyes lit up with excitement. He'd been talking about buying a new car for months, and he assumed I was just shifting things around for the new chapter he was envisioning for himself. Little did he know. I let him leave, and once he was out the door, I called the private investigator. His job was done. It was time to drop the bombshell. The plan was simple. The moment my husband set foot in his office, I would do two things. I would serve him with divorce papers, and I would send an email to all of our business contacts, showing them everything I had uncovered. The fraudulent accounts, the money he had siphoned, the payments to Claire, the lies, everything. I knew this would be the final nail in his reputation's coffin. By noon, I was at my lawyer's office, preparing for the next step. I couldn't just sit idly by. As we were finalizing the details, I got a call from the PI. He's meeting with Claire. I have him on camera, he said. Perfect, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Send me the footage. I need to send this to him when the time is right. I hung up, feeling the weight of the situation sinking in. I had everything I needed. At 1 p.m., the email went out. The subject line read, "For your awareness, fraudulent business practices and personal betrayal." It was sent to all of our clients, business partners, and the board of directors. Attached were all the documents, transaction histories, emails, texts, pictures, even the intercepted message between my husband and Claire. And then, I waited. Didn't take long for the phone call to come. My husband's voice was cold, distant. What have you done? I've done exactly what you deserve, I replied. My voice was calm, but I could feel the satisfaction building inside me. He was silent for a moment. Then came the anger. You've ruined everything. You've destroyed me. I let him scream. He had no idea what was coming next. I didn't ruin you, I said softly. You did that to yourself. You thought you could throw me away. You thought I was just going to be some silent wife in the background while you took everything. But I'm not your fool anymore. You've underestimated me from the start. There was more silence. Then he spoke again, his voice shaking with panic. What do you want? I want what's mine, I said, my voice firm. Everything you've stolen from me, my trust, my time, my dignity, I want it back. And I want you to know that I'm taking back my life, the one you tried to ruin. He didn't answer immediately. I could hear his breath coming in quick. Gasps, his mind racing, trying to find a way to regain control. But it was too late. The evidence was out, and his empire was crumbling. I heard the click of the door as he returned home later that day, his footsteps heavy with regret. By the time he walked into the living room, I was already packed. The house, our house, no longer felt like home. I had already moved everything I needed into the car, ready to leave. As he stood there, face pale, eyes wide with disbelief, I handed him the divorce papers. I'm done, I said. We're done. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. Instead, he just stood there, defeated, broken, while I walked out the door, taking my son and my future with me. The next day, he called. The tone of his voice had changed. The fight was gone, replaced by a feeble apology. But I didn't need his apologies anymore. His words meant nothing. The damage was done. The truth had come out. And now, I could finally breathe. I walked away from the wreckage of my marriage, knowing that I had taken back everything he tried to take from me. He had been blinded by his own greed and arrogance, and in the end, it was his own undoing. Karma, I realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about balance. And in that moment, I knew I had regained mine.